Hi folks, HR Funk here with my collection of 1911 pistols, and over the years I've done a lot of videos featuring the 1911 platform, and all of these pistols you see in front of you have been featured in at least one video. Some have been in several videos, and I've also done a lot of comparison videos over the years where I've compared the 1911 platform to a lot of other pistols. And I suppose the reason I've done that is because in my mind the 1911 has always represented the benchmark in terms of a semi-automatic pistol that all other semi-auto pistols are compared to. And recently I did a comparison of the 1911 A1 compared to the Marine Corps' new M18 pistol, and I was looking in that video at the evolution of handguns, particularly in the United States Marine Corps, from the early part of the 20th century up to modern times with the M18. And at the end of that video I posed a question, and I said, have we reached the day where the 1911 is now obsolete? And I want to look at that and explore that question in detail in this video and see if we can come up with an answer by the time we're done. I suppose the first thing we have to determine is, how do we judge obsolescence? In the region where I am in Ohio, I live not very far away from an Amish community. And for that particular population, horse and buggy is still a primary mode of transportation. Now I think all of us can agree that traveling by that means is obsolete, but that's something that is still practiced in that community, and they do it all the time. In fact, I have to be careful when I drive on some of the county roads to make sure I don't run into an Amish buggy. So when we look at that and we look at where there are certain people who still use certain items or certain techniques, or they still do certain things that most of us consider far out of date, how do we apply that to handguns? Now, I've done videos in the past where I've looked at defensive use of cap and ball revolvers. I've done defensive videos with single action cartridge firing revolvers, and there are some people around the world who are restricted to those types of firearms, particularly the cap and ball. There are some countries in Europe where they are restricted from owning cartridge firing handguns, so they have to use the cap and ball revolvers to this day for defensive applications. So it's difficult to come up with a way to say something is truly obsolete. If something works for a particular individual or a particular population, and that particular population or individual is still happy using that item or doing things that way, then at least for that group or that individual, that item's not obsolete. So I guess we tend to look at what society in general views as out of date or obsolete or past its time, its useful lifetime, to decide whether or not something's obsolete. And when we view that in terms of the 1911 platform, we see a pistol that was designed in the very early days of the 20th century, going all the way back to the early semi-auto pistol designs of John Moses Browning, and working it up to the point where by the time he presented it to the US military, it had become more or less the pistol that we know today. And with only a few revisions and changes over the years, the 1911 platform really hasn't changed since 1911 to current times. Now, there have been some manufacturers that have shortened or made the overall package more compact, but in general terms, the hammer-fired operating single-action semi-auto pistol with a single-stack magazine most of the time, and the probably telltale sign being the grip safety and also the manual-operated thumb safety. Those things really haven't changed from manufacturer to manufacturer unless they have radically changed the 1911 platform, which in my estimation is no longer a 1911. It's something else. It's some sort of a hybrid. But again, the general 1911 platform, and in particularly the full-size 1911s, like my American Classic II here, really are virtually the same pistol that was designed by John Moses Browning back in those early years of the 20th century. Now, when we compare the 1911 to modern designs like this Glock 19 here, and by the way, please forgive me for having a Glock in the same room with all of these 1911s. I don't like it any more than you do. I've been known to throw these things over my shoulder, so I'm going to do my best to maintain some self-control and get through this segment. In any case, when I compare the 1911 to modern pistols, we see that nowadays handguns have been made more compact, lighter, easier to maintain. They have a higher ammunition capacity. They are less expensive to manufacture. They are simpler. And all around, we see improvements over the last 110 years to the point that pistols like this that would have never even been conceived when the 1911 was first designed, that are now commonplace. And in a lot of ways, they have advantages over the 1911. So in that regard, I think obsolescence definitely is something that we see shadowing the entire 1911 platform. But does that tell the whole story? Well, let's talk about that. So 1911s are bigger, heavier. They have a reduced ammunition capacity as compared to some modern day designs. So why on earth would anyone ever elect to still carry a 1911? First off, there is just the absolute history of this platform. And as I look at these, I'm trying to figure out which one I want to pick up as I do this segment. I guess I'll go back to my basic GI style 1911. These pistols have a phenomenal track record for their performance with our United States military, going from 1911 to roughly 1985, but I've said many times I had one of these all the way up to 1989 when I left the Marine Corps the first time, and when I got recalled for Desert Storm 2 years later, I was again issued a 1911 pistol. So they didn't just stop on a certain date in 1985 and evaporate from the inventory of the US military. They were still used for many years after that. And I have a feeling in some places they are probably still being used today, although on a very limited basis. But still, we have a pistol that served our military faithfully. It was reliable in some of the most extreme conditions that our military personnel found themselves in during the 20th century. It is a very pointable pistol, and I think one of the greatest characteristics of the 1911 is that natural pointing. And the only pistol that really points better, I think, or more naturally than the 1911 is its little brother, the P35 High Power. Also with the 1911, owing largely to its single action design, you can fire it fairly quickly but still keep shots pretty easily on target. Now you can't spray and pray, but if you need to get a quick shot off with that single action trigger, it's relatively easy to do so. Now the 1911 does take some work that a lot of the modern pistols don't take. Specifically, a defensive shooter, if they are presenting the 1911 pistol, has to become competent in swiping off the thumb safety as he or she comes up on target. Which is why with the 1911, I feel like if someone selects this particular pistol, they really have to dedicate themselves to it. They have to train with this pistol to the point that everything about it becomes second nature. And if they are willing to make that commitment to the 1911 pistol, it's still capable of defending anyone just as well today as it did all the way back in 1911 when it was first manufactured. Along with the thumb safety, the 1911 design also still incorporates the grip safety. And this is something we've seen largely fade away over the years. As I understand it, the grip safety on the 1911 was something that the US cavalry wanted back in the early days of the 20th century. And it's debatable as to whether or not this is really a necessary component. It's something that I've always had on a 1911. I'm just used to it. I don't think much about it. But it does necessitate a proper grip on the pistol in order for the action to function properly. If you don't have a grip, if you have a loose grip, and right now the hammer is cocked, I have a loose grip, and okay, I put enough pressure on there that the hammer finally fell. But if you don't have that good grip, or if you're holding too low like I am here, I got just enough of it again and the hammer fell. But you can have problems with that. And the time that I noticed that is when I first started using a thumbs forward grip. And with some of my pistols, this isn't one of them, I'm modifying my grip a little bit here, but I wouldn't get quite enough pressure on that. Now when I used the old grip that I was taught in the Marine Corps, where I wrapped my non-shooting thumb over top of my shooting thumb, I never had a problem with that. But with the thumbs forward grip, that can be an issue, and that's something you have to be aware of with the 1911 platform. One of the things that's been added to the design in recent years, and I think it's a pretty good addition, and I'll use this pistol to point that out, is the addition of the raised surface at the bottom of the 1911 you can see right here, or the bottom of the grip safety rather. And when you grip the pistol, that additional surface helps to make sure that you've got the grip safety properly disengaged so you don't have that difficulty with your grip. Also, the extended portion at the rear of the grip safety has been added for some shooters that have a problem with the slide biting the top of their hand. Now, I never had that problem with any 1911, even back when this was a very reduced version of the grip tang, similar to this, which is the A2 style that was actually lengthened a little bit more than the A1 version. I never had a problem with slide bite, but there are some shooters that did. So because of that, this rear so-called beaver tail was also added. And I think those are both pretty good improvements to the design. And that largely negates some of that issue that I talked about with not being able to fully disengage the grip safety, and also helps to reduce that possibility of slide bite. So now some of you might be saying, yeah, okay, it's easy to shoot fast and relatively accurately. That's why it's still used by a lot of competitive shooters, but it just doesn't hold enough ammunition. And that's a valid criticism. Generally speaking, unless you've got one of the wide body 1911s with the double column magazines, which makes a fairly large grip, you're going to be reduced to 7 or 8 rounds in general. If you have a 9mm or 38 Super, then you might be able to up that by 1 or 2 rounds. And you can get extended magazines that protrude from the bottom of the grip, and sometimes you can get a few more rounds that way. But generally speaking, you're going to be limited to somewhere between 7 and about 10 rounds. But let's talk about what cartridges you're going to have in that reduced number of ammunition, or reduced number of cartridges. To begin with, we've got the 45 ACP. And the 45 ACP, even though some people nowadays kind of scoff at it, has worked very, very well for our military personnel for a long time. I don't remember hearing anybody complain about the performance of the 45 ACP really ever, if they have to use it to defend themselves. I've known some people who have had to defend themselves with a 45 ACP chambered pistol, and again, they have no complaints whatsoever. So that's the 45 ACP, which is the most common chambering for the 1911 pistol. But how about some of the others that we can get nowadays? Now, certainly it comes in a 9mm, and I don't have a 9mm 1911 here in front of me, but if you're someone who prefers the 9mm cartridge, but you also like the 1911 platform, you can have your cake and eat it too. Now you're only going to have about a 10 round, maybe 9 round capacity for your 1911 9mm, but you'll have all the advantages of that single action system. You'll have the natural pointing characteristics and all of that. So if you like a 9mm 1911, you can have one. Also, we have another traditional chambering for the 1911, and that's the 38 Super, which is the same as my American Classic 2 here. And I like the 38 Super cartridge. That if you look at the ballistics of the 357 SIG, it will slightly be improved over the 38 Super, but the 38 Super comes awfully close, and it does so in a conventional straight-walled case, so you don't have to worry about, particularly if you hand load, dealing with a bottleneck case or anything like that. I do hand load, and I hand load my 38 Super ammunition up to just about that close to 357 SIG. So again, we've got a good, effective chambering for the 1911. That's a traditional chambering going all the way back to the early days of the 1911. I want to say it was in the 1920s that it was originally chambered for what at that time was the 38 ACP, but because of the strength of the 1911 pistol, they were able to load the 38 ACP to a higher pressure, and the 38 Super was born. And to this day, I really like the 38 Super, and you can still get a 1911 pistol in 38 Super. How about larger and more powerful cartridges, maybe for some handgun hunting with a semi-auto platform? Down here in front, I've got my Rock Island Armory FS2 chambered for the 10mm cartridge, and the 10mm works pretty well in the 1911 platform. I like that cartridge a lot in this pistol. Now, I've seen some versions, not of the Rock Island Armory specifically, but some other manufacturers that have long slide and long barrel versions to get a little bit more velocity out of those 10mm bullets. And if you were going to use it for hunting, that's not a bad option. but that gives you a lot of power in a platform this size. You don't have to go to something like a Desert Eagle or a very large frame revolver or anything else to still get respectable power. And out of the 1911, I get ballistics that are not too far behind the 41 Magnum. It's in that same ballpark. So again, it would be valid for virtually anything you want to do as a field pistol if you're hunting or using it to defend yourself against maybe some dangerous animals or dangerous people. The 10 millimeter works very well, and that is the largest cartridge I have chambered in one of my 1911 pistols, but there have been other cartridges in the past that are even larger still chambered in these pistols because of the inherent strength of the design. So does that variety of cartridge selection override the reduced magazine capacity in the 1911 pistols? I think that question largely depends on what you're using the pistol for. For defensive applications, it's really unusual to have a lot of rounds fired. If you watch videos from actual defensive use of firearms, what you'll typically see is when the first round is fired, the bad guys that are all congregated in the area lose interest in what's going on and they leave the area very quickly. For someone to go all the way through an entire 8, 9, or 10 round magazine in a defensive application, I think is going to be the exception, not the rule. So in that defensive capacity, the 1911 still can serve pretty well. Now, it's not going to be quite as portable as the smaller, lighter, modern designs, but you still do have the advantages that I talked about with the single action platform. But as I said, you need to train with this pistol so that all of its operating characteristics are second nature. But what about size and weight? If you don't want a full-size 1911 and you want something a little bit more compact and easy to carry, they're definitely out there. I have two examples here in front of me. If you want just a more compact 1911, this is a commander size version here. Now this is an all steel pistol, so it still has weight that's not too far behind the full-size all steel 1911, but it's definitely more compact. And with that additional weight, this pistol is chambered for the 45 ACP cartridge, and that does help with recoil control somewhat. The heavier pistol doesn't have quite the muzzle flip and quite the recoil impulse that the lighter pistols do, so that might be an advantage if you have a little bit of trouble with that recoil. But as I said, it is a more compact pistol, so it's a little bit easier to pack than the full-size variation. Also, over here, I have another commander size pistol. This is my Smith & Wesson SW1911 PD with a scandium frame. So along with being compact as a commander version, this is also considerably less heavy than the full-size all-steel versions. In fact, it's a lot lighter even than this other commander size variant. So there are lightweight versions out there. Now you will get a little bit more recoil impulse with a full power 45 ACP out of this pistol, but still it is not difficult to control. It's not something that's going to be painful to shoot or anything like that. But it goes back again to, you have to shoot your 1911, you have to train with this platform, and you have to be very accustomed to it to include its recoil characteristics, so that if you have to deploy it in a defensive situation, it's not going to be something that surprises you the first time you pull the trigger. So all of this brings us back to the original question that I posed in my last video and at the beginning of this video: is the 1911 obsolete? I think if we're comparing the 1911 to any modern design, maybe I should say any successful modern design, by just about any metric, yes, the 1911 design is obsolete. It's a 110-year-old pistol design, and I think just about anything that has been designed in more recent years, I should say again, any successful design in more recent years, is probably going to render the 1911 obsolete. But does that mean that no one should use it and there's no reason to own one, and if you have one you should get rid of it or never carry it? No, it doesn't. As I said earlier in this video, the 1911 is still as capable today of defending you, defending hearth and home and all that, as it was 110 years ago. It hasn't lost any effectiveness. It's just that the design is not as modern as the things we see produced nowadays. So still, It is a carryable pistol. It's an accurate pistol. It's easy to shoot relatively quickly and keep your shots on target. It has all the advantages that it had when it was first designed. It's chambered for very effective, very historically effective cartridges. And I'm not planning on getting rid of any of mine. So, and I'm still going to carry them. So if they're obsolete, well, I'm probably obsolete too. And I don't know if any of you remember the old Twilight Zone episode, Obsolete Man. Okay, I'll be the obsolete man and still carry my 1911s. I still like them. Now, I don't carry them every day. I don't carry them all the time, but I do carry them when I want to. And it's typically, I carry them for very specific reasons or if I'm going to very specific places. Although once in a while, I'm just in the mood and I carry one of my 1911s. So again, that makes me the obsolete man. Okay, I'll go out now and hitch up my horse and buggy. And that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. Also remember, warbirdbunker.com is making t-shirts for the channel. If you go to warbirdbunker.com, you can find the t-shirt there that Nathan designed for me. And he has a lot of other patriotic and firearm themed t-shirts and also other gear there. And if you use my discount code, which is HRFUNK4U, you can also get a 10% discount on anything you purchase from warbirdbunker.com. So until next time, folks, good shooting. Bye-bye.